You meander through the late evening streets, now painted in the soft oranges and purples of the setting sun. A breeze rustles through palm fronds, and somewhere nearby, the soft bleat of a goat reminds you that the city is still gently pulsing with life. Babylon doesn't sleep easily, and neither, it seems, does its paperwork. Because tonight, you're headed to one of the busiest hubs of cuneiform chaos, the temple archives. Now, before you conjure visions of high priests and golden statues, let's be clear, this place is more bureaucratic jungle than spiritual haven. Yes, it's technically a temple, dedicated to one of the many gods who help keep life tolerably confusing. But tonight, it's doing the Lord's work in a very different sense. It's auditing grain receipts. You enter a grand, columned courtyard that smells faintly of warm stone and aging papyrus. Around the perimeter are rows of small rooms, more like stalls, each stacked with clay tablets. Hundreds of them, thousands even. If Marie Kondo had visited, she might have fainted. Inside one of the archive rooms, a scribe sits hunched at a low desk. His reed stylus darts across fresh clay with the speed of someone who's copied this phrase 1,000 times. 3 goats, 3 bushels of barley, 1 jar sesame oil. Classic. Next to him, a younger scribe is organizing tablets by shelf, muttering to himself. There's a system, of course. Kind of. Maybe. Probably. See, Babylonian record-keeping wasn't messy, it was layered. Each tablet was marked with a date, a place, names, goods, and the all-important seal impression. But that was just the beginning. Many receipts were then bundled, figuratively of course, into categories. Temple donations, market transactions, land leases, marriage agreements, and the occasional lawsuit over a goat that clearly wasn't the right goat. Historians still argue whether these archives were for public transparency, elite control, or cosmic brownie points with the gods. Maybe all 3. After all, gods love order, and humans love covering their backs. And here's where it gets fun. Some receipts weren't made just once. They were copied, sometimes twice or even 3 times, with each version kept in a different location. Think of it as the Mesopotamian version of the cloud. Tablet A stays at the temple, Tablet B goes to the buyer, and Tablet C is probably collecting dust in the back of a donkey cart. This redundancy wasn't just fussy, it was smart, because sometimes disputes arose. You said you paid your temple tax. The priest says you didn't. Who's right? Let's check the clay. Spoiler, the clay never lies. One particularly curious ritual involved baking tablets to harden them for safekeeping. Normally, clay was left to dry in the sun, good enough for everyday use. But if a document was especially important, say a royal decree or a high-value contract, it got the full kiln treatment. The logic was simple. Rain ruins receipts. You reach out to touch one of the baked tablets. It's surprisingly warm, even now, and covered in perfect little wedges. It's a receipt for a delivery of cedarwood, signed and sealed by 3 parties, one of whom was apparently very fond of exclamation marks. Next to it, a broken tablet reveals an even stranger practice. It's been scored down the middle, split in half. Babylonian scribes sometimes did this intentionally for dual authentication. One half stayed with the issuer, the other went with the receiver. Later, when proof was needed, the halves would be matched like puzzle pieces. If they fit, the deal was real. Of course, this system wasn't perfect. One humorous anecdote from a badly translated letter tells of a merchant who lost his half of a tablet and sent his brother instead, claiming he remembers the shape of it. The priest was not amused. Another quirk of the temple archives? Recycled clay. On less formal days, scribes would simply scrape off old writing, re-wet the tablet, and start again. This means that beneath your average tax receipt might lie the ghost of a love poem, a royal edict, or last week's bread order. A clay sandwich of forgotten dreams. You hear a soft laugh behind you. The younger scribe has just found a mystery tablet. No date, no seal, just a list of vegetables and a doodle of what might be a fish wearing a crown. Perhaps ancient Babylon had pranksters, too. Not all archives survived. Fires, floods, wars, history's usual suspects. But the ones that did are now gold mines for historians. From them, we learn how long a clay contract lasted, what people paid for lentils, and just how obsessed Babylonians were with accurate spelling. Interestingly, not all receipts were about goods. Some were receipts for people, confirmation that someone had been hired, apprenticed, or released from duty. One tablet even records a man's freedom after 15 years of temple labor. Paid in full, the final line reads, "You imagine he threw that tablet in the air like a graduation cap." As you wander deeper into the archive, you find a wall display with oddly shaped tablets. Round, oval, some almost heart-shaped. These were receipt tokens, possibly used for smaller trades or by people who couldn't read. The symbols were simplified, stamped in place. You don't need to read cuneiform to understand a barley stalk or a goat with a comically large tail. By now, the light outside has faded. Scribes light oil lamps, their orange glow casting dancing shadows across the walls. The temple bell chimes faintly. The air smells like ink and smoke. You take one last look at the towering shelves, imagining the stories each tablet holds. The loans, the favors, the promises made and broken. The quiet evidence of lives lived on purpose. All preserved in hardened mud. And you think all this just to prove you returned 3 jars of sesame oil on time. The night deepens, and with it, the city seems to hum in a lower key. You drift away from the temple archive, tablet dust still clinging to your sleeves, and wander through the quieter streets. Now you're headed toward one of the oldest institutions in Babylonian life, the marketplace. Not the bustling, shouting, sun-drenched bazaar of the daytime, but the hushed, lantern-lit skeleton of it. Silent stalls, shuttered doors, baskets turned upside down like sleeping turtles. You pass by a crumbling notice board plastered with clay tablets, the ancient version of community flyers. One reads, in a tight script, "One mule missing, responds to whistles." Another offers 2 jars of honey in exchange for 1 strong boy to help lift amphory. The clay corners curl up from age, like dried petals. But this isn't just about goods or gossip. The Babylonian market is where economic systems met personal reputations, and receipts, yes, our now familiar friend, were as valuable as the things they documented. You slip past a sleeping dog and duck into a half-covered shop. In the flickering lamplight, shelves still carry wares wrapped in cloth. Behind the counter is a stone box, locked, of course. Inside, a merchant's personal tablet archive, a neat stack of sales receipts, some supplier contracts, and even a couple of IOUs written hastily by neighbors. You realize this man was not just selling wine. He was running a ledger as long as his beard. Babylonian shopkeepers kept track of everything. How many fish they sold, how many were still flopping in the basin, who owed them a half-dozen figs from last week's trade fair. And because the concept of interest had already slithered into existence, debts didn't just sit, they grew. Slowly, like a moldy melon in a hot pantry. Historians still debate whether compound interest was a Babylonian invention or an unfortunate byproduct of letting scribes get too clever. One clay contract from around 2000 BCE outlines a grain loan that doubles in value after a single year. You wonder if the debtor ever saw daylight again. You flip through a sample receipt left carelessly on the shop's back table. It records a sale of 1 bronze dagger, slight bend in blade, exchanged for 2 sheep and favors yet to be named. That last bit is circled. Suspicious? Maybe. Or just very polite blackmail. It's important to know that receipts here weren't impersonal. Many were laced with flowery language, even blessings. A seller might write, "May Marduk bless your house with quiet goats," after a transaction. Others were more practical. You break it, you keep paying for it. And of course, the ever-present seals show up again. Some merchants had entire family crests carved into their seals, complete with dragons, cypresses, or birds of prey. Others preferred minimalism. A single line or a sun symbol. One tablet you examine is sealed with what looks suspiciously like a thumbprint followed by a tiny frown. You guess the merchant was having a bad day. By now, you're seated on a worn stool, legs stretched out, hands coated in the fine grit of ancient economy. The more you absorb, the more it hits you. Babylonians didn't just invent receipts, they invented trust. Or at least the paper, clay trail of it. You think about today's credit scores and review apps and electronic invoices. All of it just a fancier way of saying, yes, I really did give him the goat. Sometimes receipts weren't even about things, they were about space. One fascinating tablet documents a shop corner being rented out from sunrise to midday, with very specific instructions. No shouting, no onions. That last one is underlined twice. We can only guess why. Curiously, the Babylonians also believed in reconciling debts ritually. Every so often, cities declared a debt amnesty, a kind of financial new year called a clean slate edict. All personal debts were wiped clean. It's not clear whether merchants danced or wept during these announcements, but the tablets that survive from those moments often stop mid-sentence, as if even the scribes had dropped their styluses to celebrate. One weathered receipt tucked into a corner reads like a poem. Today I give this goat, with fur like river reeds, for peace between us. It's signed with 2 seals, side by side, probably an emotional sale, or a breakup gift. You lean back, letting the quiet swallow the last traces of the market. The stalls may be empty, but the air still carries that mix of spices, ink, and clay, the unmistakable perfume of a civilization that thought every exchange mattered enough to write down, that every deal, no matter how small, deserved a story. And so they wrote, not on papyrus, not in ink, but with wedges in clay, hardened in the sun. A receipt, yes, but also a memory. The moon hangs low now, casting long shadows across the temple walls and the rooftops of Babylon. You leave the empty market behind, stepping softly through the alleys, the soft slap of your sandals on sun-baked stone echoing faintly. The city is asleep, but your mind is still humming with the rustle of cuneiform on clay. And now we head into one of the most unexpectedly fascinating corners of Babylonian bureaucracy, the receipt archives. Yes, archives, because the Babylonians didn't just make receipts. They organized them. Imagine a room filled from floor to ceiling with little pigeonholes, each one containing tablets sorted by year, by purpose, sometimes even by the scribe who wrote them. Some buildings, particularly in temple complexes and palatial administration centers, were essentially ancient data centers, just a bit dustier and with worse lighting. You wander into one of these dimly lit record vaults. The air is thick with chalk and memories. A half-broken tablet lies on the ground, perhaps dropped centuries ago. You pick it up. The wedge marks are tidy, compact, a veteran scribe's handiwork. You squint. It's a rental agreement for a donkey. Monthly rate, 3 measures of barley and 1 promise not to overload it. In some temples, the archives were kept by specialized clay librarians. These weren't priests or scribes, but administrative stewards who spent their lives managing the endless rain of receipts, contracts, and logs that came through the doors. Historians still argue whether these archivists were revered professionals or simply the quiet guys no one else wanted to talk to. You make your way deeper. Some tablets are shelved by material traded: grain, oil, textiles, livestock. Others are grouped by trading partners, so you'll find whole rows detailing every interaction one merchant had over a 10-year period. It's like reading someone's Amazon history, except with more goats and fewer Bluetooth speakers. One corner of the room is marked with a symbol that looks like a fish wearing a crown. Curious, you peer inside. This entire alcove is dedicated to royal transactions. Turns out, even kings needed receipts. One tablet, barely larger than your palm, records the delivery of 20 jars of fig wine to the royal banquet hall, witnessed by 1 dog, 3 servants, and a nervous scribe. You chuckle, then stop. Was that last part meant to be a joke? Or was the scribe genuinely nervous about wine delivery quality control? Hard to tell. But what's clear is that everyone was subject to documentation. There are even meta-receipts, tablets that reference other tablets, like a citation or footnote written thousands of years before academia. See Clay Docket X45 for full grain inventory. 1 tablet notes. Another adds, corrected weight error from prior record, signed, Gamelson. It's strangely comforting, realizing that ancient Babylonians also made mistakes and had to awkwardly fix them later. Of course, Babylonian receipt culture wasn't just about keeping track, it was about proving things, and sometimes proving too much. One surviving archive includes multiple versions of the same transaction, each written slightly differently, each one claiming to be the original. Scholars suspect these may have been forgeries, written by clever scribes trying to tilt a deal. Ancient fraud, you think? Still classier than a bad eBay review. You sit down on a flat stone, surrounded by rows of silent tablets. The walls are so thick with history they practically whisper. You run your fingers along one particularly cracked piece. It documents a grain transfer, sealed with a mark resembling a tiny curled-up cat. Personal sigils could be that specific. You imagine a sleepy merchant gently pressing their seal into damp clay, yawning. Some receipts were even bilingual, written in both Sumerian and Akkadian, a kind of ancient dual-language contract, used especially in regions where linguistic boundaries blurred. That means some scribes had to be multilingual bureaucrats, fluent in grammar and goats. You tip your invisible hat to them. And, just like today, Babylonian record-keeping had legal weight. If someone accused you of stealing grain or underpaying for beer, you'd better have your receipt. Without it, disputes could drag on for weeks, and the temple judges, respected elders who sometimes doubled as priests, did not like their time wasted. Some court tablets read like soap operas. He says she took his cow. She says it wandered. Neighbor confirms cow is lazy. Case closed. You stretch your legs and glance at the high alcove above you. In it, sealed in waxy pitch, are the city's oldest tablets. They date back over 1,000 years before the time you're exploring. They're almost illegible, faded by fire and flood and time, but they still sit there, testaments to the oldest kind of proof. I was here. I did this. I made this trade. It's peaceful here, among these clay memories. Not grand or glorious, but deeply human. These receipts don't speak of wars or conquests. They whisper of cheese sold, of fences mended, of trust exchanged, of a life lived deliberately. As you lean back against a cool wall and close your eyes, you hear the echo of a stylus scratching into clay. Tap, tap, press. Tap, tap, press. The sound of a scribe, once again, making sure the moment is remembered. The heat of the day has long faded, and Babylon hums only with the quiet breath of night. Crickets trill softly beyond the city walls. You're still there, sitting among the receipts of the ancients, an entire civilization's worth of paperwork, now utterly silent, but still speaking volumes. And yet, the story doesn't end with clay tablets. Eventually, the Babylonians, like every great civilization, began to fade. Empires rose and fell. Assyrians came, then Persians, then Greeks, and each new power left their mark on the city's stones and scrolls. But those humble receipts? Many were buried, preserved by accident, crushed beneath collapsed walls or sealed in temple ruins that no one bothered to loot. And centuries later, they began to reappear. Picture the scene. It's the late 1800s, and British archaeologists, mustaches bristling, hats too wide, are digging through the ruins of Mesopotamia. One of them, knee-deep in dust, lifts a clay lump from the soil. He brushes it clean. It's not gold, not treasure. It's a receipt. Just a record of fish delivered to the governor's house. Probably seemed dull at the time, but these tablets changed everything. See, historians had long suspected the Babylonians were organized, maybe even bureaucratic, but these tiny receipts proved they were meticulously, almost obsessively so. The whole idea of a written economy took on new life. Suddenly, economics wasn't just something modern nations invented. It had roots that ran 4,000 years deep. And here's the best part. Some of these receipts were so well preserved that modern scholars could trace individual merchants across time. One man, Itur Shamash, appears in over 40 surviving documents, selling beer, renting donkeys, paying temple dues, and once getting fined for unclean barley. Imagine becoming famous 4 millennia later because you didn't rinse your grain. You shift your weight slightly on the stone floor, imagining what it might have been like to be Itur Shamash. Every transaction etched forever in clay. Every receipt a footprint. No escape from the record, even in death. But the real twist comes when you learn how this culture of clay survived long enough for you to hear about it tonight. The tablets were durable, yes, but it took obsessed scholars, fragile chants, and painstaking translations to bring their meanings to light. Some early excavators had no idea what they'd found. They called the tablets bricks with chicken scratches. A few even tossed them aside, thinking they were construction fragments. But slowly, through the work of patient epigraphers and codebreakers, the language of Akkadian revealed itself again, like waking a voice that had been asleep for thousands of years. Now, university basements and museum vaults across the world are filled with trays of these receipts, all cataloged, tagged, and translated. But the story isn't done yet. Many still haven't been read. Scholars estimate that tens of thousands of Babylonian tablets remain untranslated. Somewhere in those stacks, another Itur Shamash waits. Or maybe someone entirely unexpected, a woman scribe, a child apprentice, a palace cook. Historians still argue whether some of these receipts were standardized by law or if scribes had creative freedom. You can see the variety in styles. Some are neat and structured, others loopy and frantic. Maybe someone was late. Maybe someone was hungry. Either way, it's a reminder that behind each wedge-shaped mark was a human hand. Person. Maybe a teenager muttering, "Not again," as they pressed out yet another barley ledger. You take one last walk through the archive in your mind. It's quiet now. The clay is cooling. The inkless styluses are set aside. You can almost hear the last scribe of the night extinguishing his oil lamp. Outside, the sky is blooming with stars, and the ancient city breathes gently under their watch. Babylon's glory may be long gone, but its receipts, absurd as it may seem, endure. And now we rest. Wind down. You lie back against the smooth stone, feeling the weight of 4,000 years settling into your bones. Not heavy, but grounding, like the comfort of a familiar book or an old, whispered lullaby. The air is still, and the only sound is the soft brushing of wind across ancient walls. You can still picture the scribe's steady hands, the gentle press of the stylus into clay, the way each mark was made with quiet certainty. The repetition of it, the rhythm, it becomes a lull in your mind, a kind of ancient metronome. You remember the barley trader, the donkey renter, the sleepy temple librarian. None of them set out to be remembered. They were just living, buying, selling, walking through the markets, sighing at price hikes, forgetting a seal, running late to the clerk's desk. Just like you, really. Ordinary, familiar, quietly human. Let that thought settle deep. You don't need to change the world to be part of its story. Even your smallest acts, the daily exchanges, the things you scribble on a sticky note, the promises you keep, might echo further than you know. So let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders soften. Let your thoughts scatter gently like dried clay dust in a breeze. And if, in some distant future, someone ever finds a scrap of your life, a message, a photo, a sleepy online comment, may they smile and may they understand. You were here. You lived. You mattered. Sleep well, my friend. You've earned it. End of script. Sweet dreams.